Hello everyone, today I'll be introducing a new series based on Engines of Amtrak by Amtrak i365. This is a pilot episode, so if this does well then I will probably make more episodes, and I will also use this to gauge performance expectations for an Engines of New Jersey Transit series if I ever get around to making that in like a decent script, I don't know. Anyway, let's get started, shall we?
150, 40, 30, 20, 10.
In 1975, Amtrak was struggling with a serious motive power crisis. The railroad's motive power mainly consisted of EMD, F, and E units that were inherited from other railroads. These units were mechanically unreliable as they were around 25 years old by this point and had been overworked to death their entire lives. In addition, Amtrak's SDP-40Fs that were built by EMD between 1973 and 1974 were having serious reliability problems. The units had been involved in a series of derailments that were caused by a variety of issues, and on top of this, they had been outright banned from some railroads' tracks as they were suspected to be spreading the rails apart from their swaying motion caused by water in the steam generator tank sloshing around laterally. On top of this, none of the SDP-40Fs were equipped with electric head-end power generators, and instead were all equipped with steam generators. Amtrak had over 200 new Amfleet coaches that were on order from the Bud Company at the time, and these would all be equipped with head-end power systems. They did have one locomotive model equipped with AGP, that being the GE-P30CH, although these were also showing reliability problems like poor truck design, having been equipped with similar 6-axle freight-oriented trucks to those equipped on the E60 and SDP-40F. Amtrak ended up going back to EMD, who had built the problematic SDP-40F, and asked them to build a faster HEP-equipped locomotive which would be designed for shorter intercity and corridor trains equipped with Amfleet coaches, while the SDP-40F would continue long-distance service for the time being with steam-heated equipment. EMD quickly drew up plans for the EMD F40PH, and Amtrak placed their first order for the units on May 8, 1975. The first units were unveiled and entered service on April 9, 1976. The F40PH was based on the GP40-2 freight locomotive, and both locomotives shared the same EMD 645E3 prime mover. The F40PH comes in at a weight of 260,000 pounds, a height of 15 feet 7 inches, a length of 56 feet 2 inches, a width of 10 feet 7 inches, and rated for 3,000 horsepower. The F40PH's designation stands for the following: F for full width cowl body, 40 for Model 40, P for passenger gearing, and H for being equipped with head-end power. They are equipped with a Nathan P5 or Nathan K5LA air horn. Amtrak initially intended that the F40s be placed in service on the non-electrified portions of the Northeast Corridor between Boston and New Haven and the San Diegan route in California. Amtrak's first batch of 30 units went into service between 1975 and 1976. However, Amtrak's feelings about the SDP-40F and F40PH changed dramatically after 1976. In the winter of 1976-77, the weather was unusually harsh and had put much of Amtrak's steam-heated passenger equipment out of service. Amtrak was forced to put F40s equipped with Amfleets on the trains that would have otherwise used SDP-40Fs with steam-heated equipment. Because of this, Amtrak began expediting the delivery of the new AM fleets. The F40PHs and AM fleets were put under a lot of pressure throughout 1976 and 1977 as they fought their way through the winter. Their resilience, reliability, and ability to cope with the bad weather impressed Amtrak's fleet management, and by the spring of 1977, Amtrak had changed their minds about the SDP-40F. Basically, the F40PH and AM fleets had proven that they were much more reliable than the SDP-40F and the steam heated equipment, so Amtrak decided that the only logical choice was to retire the older equipment and instead adopt the F40PH for all trains. Amtrak quickly went to EMD and traded in some of their SDP-40Fs for 132 F40PHs. These F40s were part of a series known as the F40PHR. This designation also represents the same things as the original F40PH designation. The F stands for full width cowl body, the 40 for the model series, the P for passenger gearing, and the H for head and power, but the extra character, the R, stands for recycled or rebuilt, because this batch of F40s were built with components from the SDP-40Fs that were traded into EMD in exchange for them, with components such as air compressors, alternators, traction motors, and other electrical components being reused. In addition, the F40PHR had a larger fuel tank, making it better suited for long-distance trains which would run with Amtrak's newly acquired HEP-equipped Superliner cars. Amtrak, and soon after, other passenger railroads had realized that the F40PH was a locomotive that was suited for almost any kind of service. These locomotives could easily haul heavy, long-distance trains up killer grades, or pull short and light corridor trains at speeds in excess of 80 miles per hour. Taking notice of the F40's success on Amtrak, the MBTA of Massachusetts, Metra of Illinois, GO Transit of Ontario, and Via Rail, which is basically just the Canadian version of Amtrak, ordered their own units throughout the 1980s. Amtrak began using the F40PH for its advertising material, and the image of an F40PH wearing Amtrak's Phase 3 paint scheme became iconic due to this. There are countless examples of Amtrak advertising that features the F40PH. Additionally, Amtrak's F40PHs were featured in a slew of feature films throughout the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, which made them an even bigger piece of Amtrak's image than they already were. Amtrak then bought 6 units from GO Transit in 1990, causing Amtrak's fleet of F40PHs to grow to a staggering 215 units, numbered from 200 to 415. Amtrak was able to replace their entire fleet of SDP-40Fs and P30CHs with the F40PH, and the F40s, E60s, and AEM-7s became the railroad's primary source of power throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s. Amtrak's F40PHs soldiered on into the 90s, providing the railroad with reliable service. 4 of Amtrak's units have been written off and scrapped due to wrecks, but the remainder all remained in service. The F40PH's success spread to such an extent that even the freight railroads began taking notice. Norfolk Southern and other freight roads were known to lease out Amtrak F40s during power shortages in the mid to late 1990s. The F40PH became the backbone of Amtrak's fleet, and now that it had entirely replaced the P30CH and SDP-40F, they were on top of the world. Nothing could stop them. Except for aging. By 1990, many of Amtrak's F40PHs had been beaten and battered by around 10 to 15 years of continuous use. They were now falling victim to the same issues that had plagued the F&E units before them. Age. The units had been averaging 175,000 miles traveled per year, and that was causing them to age rapidly. So Amtrak began looking for a replacement locomotive. This resulted in General Electric's AMD 103, also known as the P40DC or Genesis. However, the design of the Genesis was complicated, so it caused a delay, which was long enough to cause some issues for Amtrak. To alleviate this power shortage, Amtrak ordered 20 P32-8 BWHs from GE in 1991. These were basically a Dash 8 series freight locomotive modified for passenger service and equipped with a wide nose cab. These units, nicknamed Pepsi cans due to the similarities between their special Phase 3 paint scheme and the look of 90s Pepsi cans, were often seen working alongside the F40s in the early 1990s. Beginning in 1993, Amtrak took delivery of the first few P40DCs and they began the process of retiring their F40s. Despite this, several units were repainted from Phase 3 into Phase 4. A handful of units also received the Pacific Surfliner scheme in 2000. Amtrak's Genesis locomotives continued delivery throughout the 1990s, and with the introduction of the modified P32ACDM and P42DC variants in 1995 and 96 respectively, the F40PHs were further displaced. They were eventually relegated to trains in upstate New York as their final assignments late in the 90s. With the delivery of Amtrak's final P42DC number 207 in 2001, the F40s were pushed back to just the Empire service, only running when the P32ACDMs were out of service. The final common revenue runs of Amtrak's F40PHs took place in the summer of 2002, with all retired by the end of the year. Most of Amtrak's units were placed into storage, although some were sold for scrap and others were sold to other railroads. However, not all is doom and gloom for Amtrak's trusty old workhorses. Amtrak began converting some retired F40PHs into non-powered control units, or NPCUs. This conversion basically turned them into cab cars with all propulsion components such as traction motors, prime movers, and main alternators removed. The control stands were left in place to allow for the operation of the horns, bells, and headlights. In addition, their fuel tanks were filled with sand as ballast to add weight. Their original road numbers were changed with the prefix 90 being added to them. For example, F40PH number 225 became NPCU number 9225. Some also had roll-up baggage doors added to their sides. Amtrak eventually amassed a fleet of 24 F40PH NPCUs as of 2018. Some Amtrak units were sold to tourist railroads, and others ended up rebuilt as freight units, such as those of the Iowa Northern Railway. Amtrak number 406 also didn't have its number changed with the prefix of 90, and instead stayed as No 406, and was converted to an NPCU to be put on the 40th anniversary exhibit train, and then repainted into a special scheme and used by the Winter Park Express ski train sponsored by CenturyLink, and was painted up in a special paint scheme for it before being moved to the Downeaster and continuing service there until 2020. In 2020, it was sent to Albany, New York, and disappeared for a while before re-entering service in 2023, with its number finally changed to 9406. The reason for this change was to avoid duplication with the Siemens ALC-42 Chargers being delivered to replace the P-42DC. Amtrak 281 is currently in preservation at the California State Railroad Museum, and it runs an excursion service to this day. Amtrak 231 is also preserved by Dynamic Rail Preservation and is being restored in Boulder City, Nevada. Amtrak's F40PH has left a lasting impression on Amtrak and is credited with having possibly saved the railroad in the 1970s when it was struggling to find a reliable locomotive. It also helped boost other railroads to become much larger and play bigger roles in moving passengers from place to place across the country. The locomotive continues to remain in use on Metra, Virginia Railway Express, MBTA, Via Rail, and others. Despite rapidly closing in on 50 years of service, the F40PH has left behind a drastic impact and legacy on Amtrak, and continues to write history into the books of other railroads across the country for now. And with rebuilds and refurbishments done to extend their service lives, these legendary locomotives will likely continue to do what they do best for decades to come.